Today we're going to be talking about how to trim a square in a square block like you see here. There are specialty rulers available to help you trim, but I have found a simple way to trim these without using one of those fancy rulers. So if you've been following me for a little while, you know that I like to make, whenever possible, I like to make a unit like an HST or a flying geese, or in this case, a square and a square, a little bit bigger than needed, and then being able to trim it down. I like starting with a perfectly squared up unit whenever possible when I'm making quilt blocks. So I have just made this according to the instructions in the pattern. So just make the square with the measurements that are in the pattern. Now, in this case, the instructions are telling me to trim this to 4.5 inches square. So this is right now about 4 7/8. So I need to trim this down to 4.5. So the first thing I'm going to do, I want to get two perpendicular lines. So I'm going to be using this line and this line on my mat. And I want to take these little corners and I want to line them up perfectly on those perpendicular lines. So that looks good. Because this is white fabric, I can see through the fabric a little bit and see where those lines are. But it's also always a good idea to get a straight edge and line it up with the line on the mat and make sure that you're going exactly through those little corners. Perfect. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to measure 2.25 inches from each side of the center. We're trimming this to 4.5. Half of 4.5 is 2.25. So if this is the center mark here, I know I need to trim 2.25 inches this way, and then 2.25 inches this way, and then that will give me 4.5 inches. I also want to make sure before I start cutting that I'm going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side. So if you've cut all of your pieces according to the instructions and used an exact 1/4 inch seam allowance, this should work out perfectly. So the first thing I want to check, so because I'm going to be cutting, and I've marked 2.25 inches on my ruler just to make it easy to find. So let's put 2.25 inches on the center mark, on this lined up with the center line, because remember we're cutting 2.25 inches this way. I want to make sure that I'm going to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on this side, and I do. So that little point is lining up with that little 1/4 inch mark there. And then what I'm going to do is, when I'm doing this, I try to not slide the ruler around because I don't want to slide my fabric. I'm also going to do a quick measurement over here. Yeah, I slid my fabric around. Okay, 2.25 inches this way. So I want that 2.25 inch mark on that center line. And yes, I have a perfect 1/4 inch here. Okay, so now what I can do, I would do that with all 4 sides. And now I'm going to trim, just again, making sure that I'm exactly centered. My fabric moves, so I'm just going to check this one more time. Looks good. And once you get used to doing it, it doesn't take so long. I'm kind of going through this slowly to just kind of explain things to you. Once you get the hang of this and get into a groove, it won't take you that long to trim these. So lining my ruler up on the center line. And then I'm going to trim 2.25 inches from the center line. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing this way. Okay, that looks perfect. Look, I've got a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance on each side. And now I'm going to do this the same thing, just going from that other center line horizontally. So I'm going to line that up there, measuring 2.25 inches this way. And then this over on the other side, my last side. Okay. That looks really good. I'm just going to measure it. I can use my ruler for that. Okay, so I've got it 4.5 inches that way and 4.5 inches that way. And you can see I've got a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance on every side. And so now this is ready to use in my quilt.